Hi, Nathan. You're on the air with us.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey, not too bad. What's on your mind tonight?
Nice. So I, a few weeks ago, was watching the Atheist Experience, and a guy called in and talked with him for a while. He was in kind of a rough spot, but he mentioned towards the end of the call that he was a pedophile and how he was having some problems with that, and his, because he was religious at one point, and talking about that. And after watching that show, I kind of went down a research rabbit hole where it just interested me, his position in life, about, what our attractions are moral to have, if that is a valid question to ask, or if they're all amoral, or some are, some aren't, that sort of thing. So, I was curious where you guys might stand on that. So, is there any attractions that you guys think are moral or immoral, or all of them amoral? Or I guess I'm just curious what your opinions are.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you're asking about moral or amoral, by amoral you mean just sort of without morality. I think so often we use that word to describe something that is wrong or evil, kind of missing the actual Oxford. I mean, I don't mean to get too pedantic about it, but the real meaning of that word is just existing sort of outside of morality.
Right, like atheist versus anti-theist.
Right, exactly.
No, yeah, I don't think that necessarily personal attractions have any kind of moral implications, good or bad, necessarily. It's the action that has moral implications one way or the other. And if the other person can't consent, then it's not moral to act on that. But the attraction itself is not a moral question for me.
Yeah, and that's something we've said on this show a number of times, and I think one of the most fundamental, aside from like the magic and the facts of the Bible, but one of the biggest distinctions, I think, between sort of specifically Christian morality or the Christian worldview and what we talk about here is this idea that your thoughts aren't something that you should be held responsible for. And to try and control your thoughts, to try and change the way that you think can be a really difficult path, and to do so obsessively can actually be really hurtful to people. So finding some acceptance about those thoughts is one thing, but actually acting on them is a completely different thing.
Right, I would agree completely.
Yeah, and the guy that had called in to the Atheist Experience had mentioned that it was he hadn't acted on them, but people had assumed he had, and that led to a lot of difficulties in his life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's because, like you had mentioned, that having attraction to someone isn't, a moral action, but acting on it is. I think that's one of the common things I've seen people discuss when they compare it to things like saying it's like being gay or any other orientation that you don't have a choice in the matter. But then people mention that like kids can't consent, so it's different, and therefore it is a bad thing.
Right.
But I think I'm with you guys in that it doesn't, just being attracted to something doesn't necessarily make you a moral monster. Just for that's how your thoughts work.
Yeah, exactly. And some folks are attracted to things that are unavailable to them, that would be unethical or illegal or morally wrong to act on. Some people have attractions to things that are impossible. Spend 15 minutes on Tumblr, or at least the good old days of Tumblr, and you'll find plenty of things that are like logistically impossible. But the fact that people have that interest or that attraction is completely separate from actually doing something that's going to harm another person or remove somebody's autonomy or their ability to consent.
Right, and I think I just want to clarify that is the issue here, because a lot of the same language is used by some, LGBTQ affirming Christians who say, well, you can have the attraction, but don't act on it. The difference here is just the issue of consent.
Of course.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, and I guess the last thing I would say, unless you had anything else to wrap it up, was just that if we lived in a society where we felt comfortable talking about these things, where we weren't constantly clutching our pearls and panicking anytime somebody mentioned something that we don't like or don't feel comfortable with, that person would have a much easier time. And it's not to say that they would, under any circumstances, be allowed to harm another person. Of course not. But if we were in an understanding society where we saw somebody who had that type of attraction, whether it's to something immoral and unethical to act out, or whether it's something improbable or whatever else, there are so many different ways to support people. And that shame and that loneliness is a huge part of what's making that person's life so difficult. So I think that we all have a moral responsibility to help build a more sex-positive, more communicative, just more understanding world. And that's part of why we're trying to do this every week. So I really appreciate you joining us and calling in.
Yeah, that was why I called in, is because it's difficult to find places or shows or communities or what have you that talk about these sort of things. So
yeah, I'm not entirely sure that just having this conversation hasn't completely demonetized us with YouTube. I think we'll have to dive into the particulars of their terms of service. But YouTube, as much as we're glad to be here on this platform, doesn't have the most sophisticated or sex-positive understanding of these issues either. So we're all working to build a better place while acknowledging that the world that we have is flawed.
Fair enough. Well, thank you guys for your time. That was what I wanted to just kind of touch base with you guys on. Just have a person-to-person, well, at least over the phone conversation about it. It's difficult to bring these things up in just casual conversation to delve deeper into it. So
yeah,
thank you guys for your time.
Absolutely. We have a great night. Yeah, so right out of the gates, kind of tricky material. Thank you all so much for being brave enough to come and join us tonight.
Of course.
But I think it is important that people feel that their interests, their attractions are, part of a well-balanced, healthy human diet, so long as they're acting on them in a way that's, safe, sane, consensual, and responsible in that way.
A lot of people like to use safe, sane, and consensual. Mm-hmm. There's a couple other things I like to use.
Yeah, throw it at me.
Because not a lot of people in this life are sane anymore. I know I don't feel that way all the time. There are a few. There's the 4 C's. It's like care, confidence. And there's RAC, it's risk-aware, consensual, kink. Mm-hmm. So I can always drop a note on the YouTube video later. There's a lot of really good acronyms that we use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll make sure to throw that on the footnotes to the show, because I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So give me RAC again one more time. I've heard that before.
Risk-aware, consensual, kink.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.